From the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin. President Nicolás Maduro has announced that Venezuela's cryptocurrency, the Petro, will be working globally beginning this Monday. The digital currency is part of the Recovery and Economic Prosperity Plan to promote economic growth in the country. The launch of the cryptocurrency seeks to capture the investments from abroad and will be used as a payment tool in the acquisition of goods and services. This is also an important tool in the fight against the economic blockade.
Beginning on November 5th, the Petro will go on sale on the Venezuelan public. You can buy it in sovereign bolivars and can save with a Petro certificate, which is backed in the Venezuelan oil. The Petro has a material certification and is backed and supported by Venezuelan oil, but also by law and by decree. I have incorporated in the white paper of the Petro the formula of the establishment of its value with respect to gold, diamonds, iron and aluminium. So, our Petro is born armored, with oil, wealth and meaning wealth. I proceed to sign the first copy of the white paper.
The president also ordered that the new Petro cryptocurrency be used for all future sales of oil and its derivatives that leave Venezuelan coasts. He invited Venezuelan business partners around the world to abide by this measure. Maduro also informed that the sale of international airline tickets, departure taxes at airports, payment for hotels, tourist activities, and the sale of properties must be carried out in petros. This as a way to promote and strengthen the use of the cryptocurrency. Bolivians are disappointed with the ruling at the International Court of Justice over the maritime dispute with Chile. The court ruled that Chile was not legally obligated to negotiate sea access for Bolivia. Some have said that this is not a defeat and that the country should keep fighting for access to the Pacific Ocean. Hundreds gather in the city of La Paz to listen to the final decision.
It has been an injustice to the world. Today Bolivia feels a little sad, but not defeated. Bolivia was born with sea, and sooner or later, Bolivia will have sea again.
From now on, the work we're going to have is to strengthen ourselves in all areas and recover it as Chile has done. We have no other way. We have to look for other instances to recover what was historically ours.
This sentiment was echoed by President Evo Morales when he spoke from The Hague after the decision.
With paragraph 176, the court understands perfectly that there is an unresolved issue between Bolivia and Chile. There's no obligation, but there's a need not only for these two countries, but for the whole region to resolve this issue between Bolivia and Chile. Bolivia will never stop fighting for access to the ocean.
And the president of the court ruled that Chile had no legal obligation to negotiate with Bolivia for sovereign access to the sea. He said the judges had reached this decision by 12 votes to 3. But he added that this ruling does not prevent the two sides from continuing their dialogue in the spirit of good neighbors.
The court cannot infer from the content of these resolutions, nor from Chile's position with respect to their adoption, that Chile has accepted an obligation to negotiate Bolivia's sovereign access to the Pacific Ocean.
Chilean President Sebastián Piñera also spoke on this resolution.
The ICJ has served justice and has put things in their place, clearly and categorically establishing that Chile has never had any obligation on the matter of international rights on its relationship with Bolivia.
Now we move to Costa Rica, where workers have been protesting for 4 weeks now against a fiscal reform pushed by the government of Carlos Alvarado Quesada. Both sides have failed to reach an agreement this Sunday to put an end to the ongoing strike. Unions say they shouldn't pay for the cost of the economic crisis hitting the country. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, tells us more.
The third week of the open-ended strike called by workers of the public sector has come to an end in the midst of dialogue attempts with the government. Workers are protesting against the fiscal reform proposed by the government that's currently discussed at the Legislative Assembly. Trade unions and workers are asking the government not to make them and the most vulnerable sectors pay the cost of the fiscal crisis the country is facing. The government has proposed a package with 4 bills that are under discussion. Workers are urging for a national dialogue to modify these proposals and for measures to avoid tax evasion. Protests, different events, and some road blockades continue.
That was Fernando Francia from Costa Rica. In a last-minute deal, the United States and Canada have reached an agreement to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement with a trilateral pact with Mexico. Canada would give U.S. dairy farmers access to around 3.5% of its domestic dairy market, a market that is nearly $16 billion. But the two countries failed to reach an agreement regarding U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. This would salvage the $1.2 trillion open trade zone from collapsing. The 3 countries plan to sign the new agreement at the end of November.
This is too important, what we're doing, one of the most important deals and the most important trade deal we've ever made by far.
Speaking to members of parliament, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that modernizing the NAFTA agreement is good for Canadians.
What we've moved forward with in terms of labor standards in North America is historic in terms of protecting the rights of workers. What we've moved forward for on the environment is strengthened environmental protections and real consequences within the accord that had never been done before. We are moving forward in a deal that works for the middle class and people working hard to join it, and that is at the heart of the progressive agenda of this government and of this progressive trade deal.
Nicaragua's Vice President Rosario Murillo says the government is working on a national agreement for peace and reconciliation. It is aimed at putting an end to the political crisis that has engulfed the country since mid-April.
We are calling for a great national agreement on peace. That's the call we have made every day. Let's stand together. Let's join to defend our homeland. Let's join to defend peace.
In an exclusive interview with Telesur, the Foreign Minister of Nicaragua, Denis Moncada, spoke on the interference by the government of the United States and the attacks against democratic countries in Latin America.
We have to fight in a manner which is permanent, and it's part of the challenges we have in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the entire world. We have to ensure that freedom, independence, and self-determination prevails, and we have to fight for non-interference by the powers of North American empire. We are against a policy of interference and permanent interventionism against our peoples, against our democratically elected governments, which are legitimate and constitutionally elected. We must put a break, a halt to U.S. intervention specifically, and any other powers which may opt to intervene.
Coming up, more stories. We'll be back. Welcome back. Indigenous communities in Colombia are strongly rejecting a government-proposed land reform law. They say it violates elders' ancestral rights to land. Let's see why in this story.
Several indigenous organizations protested in Bogotá and Cundinamarca against a bill that aims to change the land law.
We've made a call to justice to protect our land and indigenous people's rights to it. Also, it's about the right to have prior consultation, We want them to order the Colombian government to throw out the draft law, which was presented in Congress. Native Colombians must be included in the consultation process.
Ethnic communities rejected the plan to change the 1994 law because they say it would violate the obligation to prior consultation. This would only benefit the few who hold the reins of economic power.
The right to own lands, cultural rights, such as language diversity, for example, would also be violated if the government fails to abide by the requirement of previous consultation. If not, all of the Colombian indigenous peoples will disappear. I'm talking about physical and cultural extinction.
Afro, Rizal, Paliquero, and rural peoples have always worked to protect the lands, the woods, the mountains, jungles and seas, and the ancestral cultures. They fight this government's plan because if they don't, they say it could lead to their extinction.
The right to own lands, cultural rights, such as language diversity, for example, would also be violated if the government fails to abide by the requirement of previous consultation. If not, all of the Colombian indigenous peoples will disappear. I'm talking about physical and cultural extinction.
Indigenous communities are calling on President Ivan Duque and the Congress to protect these rights and in so doing preserve Colombia's ancestral communities. They say they are prepared to seek the intervention of international organizations should the government fail to heed their concerns.
Colombia's President Ivan Duque has signed a new anti-drug decree. The measure now allows the police to confiscate even the minimum dose of marijuana, although its consumption was decriminalized in 1994. Critics say the decree usually does not deal with drug traffickers, but criminalizes consumers. Colombia continues to be the world's biggest cocaine-producing country. The G20's Gender Equality Summit, known as the W20, has kicked off in Argentina. Its main focus is women's empowerment and how to get more female representation in institutions across the globe. From Tuesday, 65 delegates will discuss on these and other issues related to women for 3 days. Members of Argentina's Central Workers Union are camping outside the National Congress to protest the proposed national budget. They've placed tents outside the building where they vow to remain until Friday. The national budget is set to be debated throughout the week. Protesters say the proposed fiscal package will work against the people as it will reflect the interests of the IMF. Social organizations are set to join the strike. They're demanding that the government put an end to price hikes and budget cuts. In Mexico City, the anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre of 1968 will take place on October 2nd. Let's learn about what survivors and social organizations have planned for this commemoration.
Felix has returned here to the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Mexico City, almost 50 years from the event that changed his life and the entire nation as well, the so-called Night of Tlatelolco. Here the state repressed with violence a student movement of which he was member of, something that was engraved in history.
People know that here at Tlatelolco, a crime against humanity was committed, a crime of genocide remains unpunished.
The violent event, in which armed and paramilitary forces participated under the president's command, left an undetermined number of dead people, but also marked the future of social and political movements in the country, which are prepared today to pay tribute to the victims of the massacre.
The commemorations organized by student movements are also protests that follow the slogan, "The victims of 1968 are remembered."
Throughout the city, more than 100 events are planned to remember this historical date. This exhibition used images which during those years were not able to be published because of the government's censorship to explain the student movement.
We are helping other people to understand why the movement was so revolutionary. They really tried to change things. We are remembering their 100 glorious days, 3 months of struggle and resistance.
President-elected Andrés Manuel López Obrador recognized the importance of the anniversary and made a commitment to obtain peace.
Here, in this historical plaza, La Plaza de las Tres Culturas, we make the commitment
to never use the army again to repress the people of Mexico.
During the 50th anniversary of Tlatelolco massacre, several social organizations will carry out a demonstration to the Zócalo Square chanting, "October 2nd will never be forgotten."
Now to Brazil, where the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad visited former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Monday. 6 days ahead of the October 7th presidential elections, the candidate and the former president met in prison. Lula has been detained there since April, facing a 12-year conviction that made him unable to run for president. The latest polls reveal Haddad is in second place behind far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro. And on Sunday, the presidential candidates held another televised debate in Brazil. Several of the candidates paid tribute to the millions of women who marched over the weekend. These women were opposing Bolsonaro over his homophobic and sexist views. Bolsonaro left a hospital during the weekend where he was receiving treatment after being stabbed during the campaign.
It's about defending democracy and defending the rights of women, of workers. This is very important for democracy and for Brazil. Brazil needs to discuss the future, and people are going out into the streets to take ownership of the future.
When I saw Brazilian women agitate and occupy Brazil's streets in their millions, I thought there is something very healthy, very strong, very beautiful in my country despite a fraction which is civically ill.
In Trinidad and Tobago, the finance minister has rolled out a $7 billion national budget. With immediate effect, the cost of super gasoline will increase by $1 per liter. Minister Com Imbert also announced an increase in public servants' pensions. The budget comes as state-owned oil company Petro closed its refinery.
In order to minimize the overall negative effects of this inevitable decision to get out of refining, the board of Petrotrin and the Oilfield Workers Trade Union have begun the process for ensuring that the employees of Petrotrin are provided with transitional finance for their reintegration into the national economy. The terminated permanent, temporary and casual employees of Petrotrin will be provided with attractive termination packages. Early estimates put this termination payment at approximately $2.6 billion.
And Trinidad and Tobago inked a major gas deal with Venezuela. Minister Imbert talked about the details of this agreement.
We have concluded the commercial negotiation for the sale of gas from the Dragon field in Venezuela. A pipeline, to be built at a cost of $1 billion, will be owned in a joint venture company between the National Gas Company and Shell Trinidad. The pipeline will transport the natural gas from eastern Venezuela to the Hibiscus platform off the north coast, which is owned by Shell Trinidad. The revival of the sector will be sustained as we move to conclude arrangements for cross-border gas in the Lauren Manatee fields, which straddle the maritime borders of both our countries.
A dozen activists who were performing a sit-in against U.S. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh have been arrested in Washington. They were detained outside the Eisenhower Executive Office building after they refused to leave. Kavanaugh's nomination is under threat after he was accused of sexual assault against Professor Christine Blasey Ford. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. Welcome back. The death toll in Indonesia after Friday's earthquake and tsunami has reached at least 1,200 people. According to authorities, 1,700 houses were destroyed. Floods left several roads destroyed. And in one of the hardest hit areas, the city of Palu, citizens are trying to recover their belongings from the damaged homes. Search and rescue teams continue to look for survivors in the northern region of the country.
The ground was broken in half, and then the earthquake changed the terrain, and that's why some of the houses were taken away.
Our correspondent Isaura Diaz gives us more details.
The tragedy in Indonesia continues as the death toll has increased to more than 1,000 people after the 7.5 magnitude earthquake. According to the spokesperson for the country's disaster management agency, about 2.4 million people were affected by the quake and tsunami. On top of that, more than 17,000 have been left homeless, and more than 70 foreigners also had to be evacuated to Jakarta. Lack of machinery, personnel, and electrical service has created additional difficulties for the rescue operations. The president of the country visited affected areas and hospitals, and he asked the residents for patience.
That was Isaura Diaz. Police and protesters came head-to-head during anniversary events marking the independence referendum, which was held 1 year ago. Riot police used repressive tactics against pro-independence demonstrators after a march in Barcelona. A group of independence supporters headed towards the Catalan parliament, where a confrontation started with officers. In the afternoon, nearly 200,000 people marched to mark the anniversary.
We're a little disappointed lately because we think that we need to take the final step. And right now we're at this point when we see that this is not happening and everything is very paralyzed and the people are waiting for a push.
Almost 100 people have been injured by Israeli forces on the seashore of the Gaza Strip. Israeli forces fired tear gas and gunfire at a naval march that protested the 12-year-long maritime blockade of the Strip. Following the gunfire, demonstrators were forced to stop their advance and return to shore. The political opposition in the Democratic Republic of Congo has agreed to present a joint candidate in the December elections. Despite this, they have not officially announced a candidate, but speculation points to Felix Tshisekedi. This decision has excited many Congolese, hoping that the unity will bring the first peaceful transfer of power.
Oh, it's clear. Felix Tshisekedi is more famous. Congolese people want to see Felix Tshisekedi president of this country.
The people have called Felix Tshisekedi. Even one of the candidates named him. So we know that it's just a matter of few days, and they're gonna officially appoint Mr. President Felix Tshisekedi, such as the common candidate for the elections.
Protesters have fought running battles with South African police in protests against police failure to curb gang violence. The protests erupted following the fatal shooting of a woman who was caught in the crossfire of a shootout between rival gangs. The residents have accused the police of failing the community and working with drug dealers.
Our children are dying each and every day now. The police are doing nothing about the drugs and everything. That's why we're protesting now.
Hundreds of swimmers in Senegal participated in the Dakar Gorée Island race. The competition pays tribute to the former slaves who didn't want to be sold on the Gorée Island. It is said that they used to jump in the water to try to reach the Dakar. Swimming now, and the professional and amateur swimmers swam 5 kilometers to the former slave port. Around 5,000 revelers from home and abroad gathered in Ugandan capital Kampala on Saturday to grab mugs of beer and make a toast to celebrate the annual Oktoberfest. It was also the day to show off traditional German clothing. Quite a few revelers gracefully donned their dirndl dresses and lederhosens. People filled themselves with golden-colored brews to have a taste of Germany in a local setting. Organizers say the number of Oktoberfest attendees grows with every celebration.
And I'm very happy that I don't need to explain why. You can see it all, you can hear it all in this place tonight.
Especially at the last part, when everybody's hand was shaking.
I said a whole flower still.
And in Munich, and it's quite a lovely costume, so very, very friendly.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all our latest videos, our opinion articles, everything on Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa as well. So check it out. And you can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.